Red and blue lights violently strobed against the obsidian paint of the brand new Mercedes. Cold steel handcuffs clicked tightly around the wrists of a woman who routinely sent men to federal prison. Officer Colton Briggs thought he had nabbed a slick car thief. Instead, he had just arrested a sitting federal judge. The Honorable Vivian Harlan was exhausted. At 58 years old, she had spent the last 15 years serving as a United States District Judge for the Eastern District. Her courtroom was known as a place of absolute order, razor-sharp legal scrutiny, and uncompromising fairness. She was a woman who had broken through every glass ceiling imaginable, fighting her way from a working-class neighborhood to the Ivy League, and finally, to a lifetime appointment on the federal bench. It was a crisp autumn evening, and a sharp chill hung in the air. Vivian had just wrapped up a grueling 3-week white-collar fraud trial. To celebrate her recent birthday and the conclusion of the exhausting case, she had finally treated herself to something she had wanted for a decade: a 2026 Mercedes-Benz S580. It was a masterpiece of German engineering, painted an elegant obsidian black with an immaculate cream leather interior. She was driving home through the wealthy, manicured enclave of Crestview Hills, a suburban fortress of sprawling estates and private country clubs. Vivian lived in Crestview. She had owned a beautiful home there for 8 years. But tonight, she was not wearing her usual tailored St. John knits or her black judicial robes. She was dressed down in a simple gray cashmere sweater, comfortable dark jeans, and loafers. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, unbothered knot. She looked like anyone else trying to get home after a long week. Sitting in a police cruiser tucked behind a cluster of thick oak trees was Officer Colton Briggs. Briggs was a 10-year veteran of the Crestview Hills Police Department. He was a man who prided himself on being a wolf hunter in a town of sheep. In reality, his personnel file was thick with excessive force complaints and allegations of racial profiling, all meticulously swept under the rug by a sympathetic union representative and a department desperate to avoid bad PR. Beside him sat his new partner, a 23-year-old rookie named Julian Ellis, who was fresh out of the academy and still idealistic enough to believe policing was about helping people. As Vivian's sleek Mercedes glided silently past their hidden cruiser, going exactly the speed limit of 35 miles per hour, Briggs's eyes narrowed. "Look at that," Briggs muttered, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. "Look at what?" Officer Ellis asked, glancing up from the mobile data terminal. "They aren't speeding. Brand new S-Class, dealer tags," Briggs noted, his voice dripping with cynical suspicion. As the streetlights illuminated the interior of the Mercedes for a fraction of a second, Briggs caught a glimpse of the driver, a black woman in casual clothes. In his deeply biased, preconceived worldview, the math did not add up. Crestview Hills was overwhelmingly white, and the few minorities who lived there were usually recognized by the local patrolman. Briggs did not recognize her, therefore, she did not belong. "Probably a joyride," Briggs said, shifting the cruiser into drive. "Or someone moving weight. You don't drive a $150,000 car in a hoodie." "It's a cashmere sweater, Colton," Ellis pointed out softly, "and she's doing the speed limit." "Criminals always do the speed limit when they're holding," Briggs sneered, ignoring the rookie's hesitation. He pulled out from behind the trees and accelerated, closing the distance between the cruiser and the Mercedes. Inside the S-Class, Vivian glanced in her rearview mirror. She saw the headlights rapidly approaching and then locking onto her bumper. She sighed, feeling a familiar heavy knot form in her stomach. Despite her elite status, her education, and her immense federal authority, she knew exactly what was happening. It was a reality she had spoken about at law symposiums across the country. Just a routine run of the plates, she thought to herself, maintaining her speed and keeping her hands positioned perfectly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Let him run them. Let him see it's registered to my address. But Briggs did not want to just run the plates. The temporary dealer tag was slightly obscured by the metallic frame the dealership had installed. It was a weak pretext, but legally, it was all the excuse he needed. The cruiser's light bar exploded into a blinding frenzy of red and blue. The siren chirped, a sharp, aggressive burst of sound that shattered the quiet neighborhood. Vivian did not panic. She did not swerve. She calmly activated her right turn signal, smoothly decelerated, and pulled the Mercedes into the well-lit parking lot of a closed, high-end boutique. She placed the car in park, turned off the engine, turned on the interior dome light, and rolled down her window. She placed both hands flat on the steering wheel, exactly where they could be seen. In the cruiser, Briggs smirked. "Watch and learn, kid," he told Ellis. "I'm going to rattle her cage, see what shakes loose." Briggs stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his utility belt. He walked with an exaggerated, wide-stanced swagger, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. He stopped just behind the B pillar of the Mercedes, a tactical position designed to keep the driver at a disadvantage. "Evening," Briggs said, his tone flat, entirely devoid of the standard officer-friendly courtesy. He shined his heavy mag light directly into Vivian's eyes, blinding her temporarily. Vivian blinked, squinting against the harsh glare. "Good evening, officer. Could you please lower the light slightly? It's right in my eyes." Briggs did not move the flashlight an inch. "I'll keep it right where it is, ma'am. Whose car is this?" "It is my car," Vivian replied, her voice remaining steady, modulated, and professional, the same voice she used when overruling objections from hot-headed defense attorneys. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is I can't read your temporary tag. Where are you heading tonight?" "I am heading home." "And where is home?" Briggs asked, leaning in slightly, his eyes scanning the luxurious interior, looking for any excuse. A smell, a visual cue to tear the car apart. "About 2 miles from here, on Oakwood Drive," Vivian answered. Briggs let out a dry, condescending chuckle. Oakwood Drive was the most exclusive street in Crestview Hills. "Oakwood Drive, right. Do you have a driver's license and registration for this vehicle, or did you leave those in your other mansion?" Vivienne felt the sting of the insult, but she pushed her emotions down. She was a judge. She dealt in facts, not ego. She had her federal judicial credentials in her purse, right next to her standard state driver's license. She could easily flash the gold badge, drop her title, and end this charade instantly. Briggs would likely pale, apologize profusely, and retreat to his cruiser. But as she looked at Officer Briggs' smug, contemptuous face, a different thought occurred to her. If this is how he treats a middle-aged woman sitting quietly in a car, how does he treat the teenagers in this town? How does he treat people who don't have the vocabulary or the confidence to defend themselves? She decided right then and there. She was not Judge Vivian Harlan tonight. She was just Vivian, a private citizen. She wanted to see exactly how the Crestview Hills Police Department operated when they thought no one of consequence was watching. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat," Vivian stated clearly. "I'm going to reach over and get it now." "Move slow," Briggs commanded sharply, his hand tightening on his holster. Vivian retrieved her wallet, extracted her state driver's license, and handed it through the window, along with the crisp, newly printed dealership bill of sale and temporary registration. She deliberately left her federal ID hidden inside the leather folds of the wallet. Briggs snatched the documents from her hand. He glanced at the name, Vivian Harlan. It did not ring a bell. To him, federal judges were old white men with gavels, not black women in cashmere sweaters. "Sit tight. Keep your hands on the wheel," Briggs ordered, turning his back and strutting back to his cruiser. Back in the squad car, Briggs tossed the license onto the center console. "Everything check out?" Rookie Ellis asked, looking at the spotless driving record that was already populating on the screen. "No warrants. Address matches Oakwood Drive." "It's a fake," Briggs declared stubbornly. "A fake?" Ellis frowned, typing the ID number into the federal database. "Colton, it's scanning perfectly. The bill of sale matches the VIN on the dash." "Are you telling me how to do my job, Ellis?" Briggs snapped, his face flushing with anger. "I know a ghost car when I see one. These high-end theft rings, they have sophisticated fake IDs. They steal the car from the dealership lot, print a fake temp tag, and drive it right out of the state. I'm telling you, she doesn't own this car. I'm getting her out." "Colton, wait. We don't have probable cause for an extraction." "I have reasonable suspicion that a crime is being committed," Briggs interrupted, weaponizing legal jargon to justify his bruised ego. "That gives me the right to conduct a Terry stop, detain the suspect, and investigate further. Now get out of the car and watch my six." Briggs marched back to the Mercedes. This time, the swagger was gone, replaced by an aggressive, coiled tension. He did not stop at the B-pillar. He walked right up to the driver's door and slammed his open palm against the roof of the S-Class. The loud bang made Vivian flinch slightly, her heart rate spiking. "Step out of the vehicle," Briggs ordered loudly. Vivian turned her head, looking at the officer with a gaze that had withered arrogant prosecutors and hardened criminals alike. "Officer, I have provided my valid identification and the vehicle's proof of purchase. What is your reasonable, articulable suspicion to order me out of my car?" Briggs's eyes widened in furious disbelief. He hated it when citizens used legal terms. To him, it was a challenge to his absolute authority. "I am giving you a lawful order," Briggs shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls of the empty boutique. "Step out of the car right now, or I will extract you through this window." Officer Ellis, standing a few feet back, shifted uncomfortably. "Colton, dial it back," he whispered, but Briggs ignored him. Vivian realized the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The man was not operating on logic. He was operating on unchecked adrenaline and bias. She knew the Supreme Court precedent, Pennsylvania versus Mims, gave officers the right to order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop for officer safety. But this was not about safety. It was about dominance. Still, Vivian was a creature of the law. She would comply with the physical order and fight the legal battle in the arena she controlled, the courtroom. "I am stepping out," Vivian said calmly. She pulled the handle and pushed the heavy door open. She stepped onto the pavement, standing at her full height of 5'9", looking Briggs squarely in the eye. "Turn around and place your hands on the roof of the car," Briggs barked, reaching to his belt and unhooking his handcuffs. "Officer," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the terrifying weight of absolute authority. "I strongly advise you to call your watch commander or the precinct captain before you take another step. You are making a profound mistake." "The only mistake here is you thinking you can talk your way out of a felony," Briggs sneered. Before Vivian could say another word, Briggs grabbed her left wrist, twisting her arm behind her back with unnecessary force. The sudden sharp pain shot through her shoulder. She gasped, shocked by the sheer physical brutality of the movement. "Stop resisting," Briggs yelled, a phrase he used purely for the benefit of his rookie's body camera. "I am not resisting," Vivian said through gritted teeth, holding her right arm out to comply. "But you are currently assaulting a private citizen without cause." Click, click, click. The cold steel jaws of the handcuffs clamped down viciously around her wrists. Briggs squeezed them tight, too tight. The metal bit into Vivian's skin, pinching her nerves. Across the street, the door to a high-end wine bar opened. A patron, a local corporate attorney named Gideon Wells, stepped out into the cool air. He froze, watching the scene unfold under the harsh glare of the streetlights. He pulled out his phone and instinctively hit record, zooming in on the aggressive officer and the elegantly dressed black woman pressed against the side of the luxury car. "You're under arrest on suspicion of grand theft auto," Briggs recited, patting her down roughly. "You haven't even verified the VIN," Vivian pointed out, her breathing shallow but her mind racing with complete clarity. She was mentally cataloging every violation, every breach of protocol, every civil rights infringement. It was a staggering list. "I don't need to verify anything with you." Briggs shoved her toward the cruiser. "Ellis, search the car." "Colton, we can't search the car without a warrant or her consent," Ellis protested, his voice cracking slightly. "The arrest is based on suspicion, not hard evidence." "Then inventory it for the tow truck," Briggs yelled back, losing control of his temper. He opened the back door of the cruiser and forcefully guided Vivian inside, pushing her head down with his hand in a demeaning gesture. Vivian found herself sitting in the claustrophobic, hard plastic back seat of the police cruiser. It smelled heavily of cheap pine air freshener, stale sweat, and bleach. Her shoulders ached from the unnatural angle of the tight cuffs. She looked through the metal cage separating the front and back seats. Briggs slid into the driver's seat, breathing heavily. A triumphant smile plastered across his face. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, Unit 4. I have one female in custody. Suspicion of GTA requesting a flatbed tow to impound a Mercedes S-Class." "Copy, Unit 4. Tow is en route." Ellis got into the passenger seat, looking pale and sick to his stomach. He looked back through the cage at Vivian. She was not crying. She was not screaming. She was sitting perfectly straight, her eyes locked onto the back of Briggs' head with an expression of cold, terrifying calculation. You people always think you're so smart, Briggs chuckled, putting the car in drive and pulling away from the scene, leaving the beautiful Mercedes behind for the tow truck. Think you can waltz into Crestview Hills and take whatever you want? Well, you picked the wrong town and you picked the wrong cop. Vivian leaned her head back against the hard plastic partition. She let out a slow, measured breath. Officer Briggs, Vivian said, speaking his name for the first time after reading his nameplate. Her voice was eerily calm, devoid of any panic. I want you to remember everything you've said and done tonight, because I promise you I will. Briggs just laughed, turning up the volume on the cruiser's radio. He was absolutely convinced he had just made a career-boosting bust. He had no idea he had just driven his career off a cliff. The cruiser sped through the quiet streets, turning toward the Crestview Hills Police Department. Inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit precinct, Captain Donovan Hale was packing up his briefcase, ready to head home for the weekend. He was a good cop, a weary administrator who spent most of his days cleaning up the messes his aggressive patrolmen made. He had no idea that the biggest mess of his life was currently pulling into his loading dock, securely handcuffed in the back of Unit 4. The Crestview Hills Police Department booking area was a harsh, unforgiving space. Fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets overhead, casting a sickly pallor over the scuffed linoleum floor and the heavy steel benches bolted to the cinderblock walls. Officer Colton Briggs practically dragged Vivian through the heavy electronic double doors, his grip still uncompromisingly tight on her cuffed arms. Rookie Julian Ellis trailed behind them, looking as though he were walking to his own execution. The sick feeling in his gut had only intensified during the ride. His instincts screamed that a catastrophic error was unfolding, but he lacked the authority or the courage to stop his senior officer. Hey, Stan, Briggs barked at the desk sergeant, a heavy-set veteran named Stan Kowalski, who was lazily scrolling through a sports website on his desktop. Got a live one for you. Grand Theft Auto, possible fake ID. We're impounding a brand new S-Class. Kowalski barely glanced up. Another one, Colton? You're padding your stats for the month. Just doing my job, Stan. Briggs puffed out his chest, shoving Vivian toward the chain-link holding cage. Stand there. Face the wall. Vivian did not face the wall. She turned slowly, the heavy steel handcuffs clinking against each other, and leveled a look of pure, unadulterated ice at Briggs. The pain in her shoulders from the awkward, prolonged restraint was intense, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a grimace. I demand that you summon your watch commander immediately, Vivian said. Her voice cut through the stale air of the precinct like a surgical scalpel. It was not a request. It was an absolute directive. Briggs laughed, unbuckling his duty belt and placing it in a locker. Demand all you want, lady. The only person you're going to be demanding anything from is a public defender in the morning. Stan, log her personal effects. I want her purse dumped and inventoried. I bet she's got a burner phone and a whole stack of fake cards in there. Kowalski sighed, sliding a heavy gray plastic bin across the stainless steel counter. All right, put the purse in the bin, Ellis. Ellis swallowed hard. He stepped forward and gently placed Vivian's elegant black leather handbag into the bin. Colton, I really think we should call the captain. He's still upstairs in his office. I don't need the captain to book a car thief, Briggs snapped, irritated by the rookie's constant whining. He walked over to the counter, grabbed the purse, and unceremoniously upended it. The contents spilled out onto the cold steel with a chaotic clatter. A tube of expensive lipstick, a set of house keys, a compact mirror, a pair of reading glasses, and finally, a thick, dark mahogany leather wallet. Let's see who you really are, Briggs sneered. He snatched the wallet, ripping open the magnetic clasp. He dug his thick fingers into the primary card slot, intending to pull out the driver's license she had handed him earlier to run it again. But his fingers caught on something heavier, something stiff and metallic. Briggs yanked it out. A heavy leather folio fell open onto the counter. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights suddenly seemed deafening. Gleaming under the harsh white glare of the precinct bulbs was a solid gold badge. Next to it, encased in thick laminate, was a federal identification card bearing the seal of the United States government. The bold black lettering leaped off the card like a physical blow to Briggs's face. Vivian Harlan, United States District Judge, Eastern District. Briggs stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face so fast he actually swayed on his feet. The arrogant, triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. The silence in the booking room became absolute, suffocating, and heavy. Kowalski leaned over the counter, his eyes squinting to read the ID. When his brain processed the words, United States District Judge, the desk sergeant dropped his pen. It clattered loudly against the floor. "Colton," Kowalski whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you just do?" Before Briggs could formulate a single word of his defense, the heavy wooden door leading to the administrative offices swung open. Captain Donovan Hale walked out carrying his leather briefcase, his tie loosened around his neck. He was mentally preparing for a quiet weekend of fishing. "Evening, Stan, Briggs, Ellis," Hale said, not really paying attention as he headed for the exit. But the unnatural, statuesque stillness of the officers caught his eye. He stopped. He looked at Briggs's pale, sweating face. He looked at the rookie who looked like he was about to vomit. Then Hale looked at the woman standing in handcuffs by the holding cage. Hale's breath hitched. He did not just recognize her from a database. He had testified in her courtroom 3 years ago during a massive federal RICO case involving a local crime syndicate. He knew exactly who she was. She was known among law enforcement as the Iron Gavel, a judge who despised police corruption even more than she despised the criminals they caught. "Judge Harlan," Hale gasped, his voice cracking. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Vivienne stood tall, the silver handcuffs glinting on her wrists. "Good evening, Captain Hale. It is regrettable that we are meeting again under these specific circumstances." Hale's eyes darted from the cuffs on the federal judge to Briggs, who was now shaking visibly. "Briggs," Hale said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet, dangerous register, "get those cuffs off her right now." "Captain, I didn't know," Briggs stammered, fumbling blindly for his handcuff keys, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them twice. "She was in a new S-Class, temporary tags. I thought it was a stolen—" "Shut your mouth!" Hale roared, the volume shaking the dust from the ceiling tiles. "Not another word! Unlock her!" Briggs practically lunged forward, his hands trembling as he jammed the small key into the cuffs. Click, click. The steel jaws released. Vivienne slowly brought her arms forward, rubbing the deep, angry red welts left by the over-tightened metal. She did not break eye contact with Briggs. "Captain Hale," Vivienne said, her voice remaining impossibly steady, echoing with the cadence of a woman pronouncing a sentence. "This evening, this officer initiated a traffic stop without probable cause. He detained me without reasonable articulable suspicion. He physically assaulted me, applying these restraints with intent to cause pain. He illegally seized my vehicle, and he explicitly stated his intention to search my property without a warrant." Hale closed his eyes, rubbing his temples as a massive migraine instantly bloomed behind his eyes. He knew his department was looking at a nuclear-level lawsuit. "Your Honor, I cannot apologize enough," Hale pleaded, stepping forward. "This is an egregious violation of protocol. I assure you, he will be disciplined severely. I will personally drive you home right now and have your car delivered to your driveway." Vivienne picked up her wallet from the counter, slipping the gold badge back inside. "Captain, an apology implies a simple mistake was made." Vivienne replied coldly. "What happened tonight was not a mistake. It was a targeted, racially motivated deprivation of rights under color of law. If he feels emboldened to do this to a federal judge in a luxury vehicle, I shudder to think what he does to the young, disadvantaged citizens of this county who cannot fight back." The precinct doors suddenly buzzed, and the heavy glass swung open. In walked Gideon Wells, the corporate attorney who had been drinking at the wine bar. He looked past the desk sergeant and locked eyes with Vivienne. "Judge Harlan," Wells said smoothly, holding up his smartphone. "I thought you might need some independent counsel, or at the very least, an evidentiary exhibit. I recorded the entire interaction from across the street. The audio is crystal clear. He threatened to pull you through the window before you even had a chance to speak." Briggs's knees almost buckled. Video evidence, audio evidence, a federal judge as the victim, a high-powered attorney as the star witness. It was the perfect storm of absolute professional destruction. "Thank you, Mr. Wells," Vivienne said. She turned back to Captain Hale, who looked like a man watching his entire precinct burn to the ground. "Captain," Vivienne instructed, "I am not going home. I want you to open an interview room. I want a formal complaint filed immediately. Furthermore, I am exercising my right as a private citizen to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Officer Briggs's actions constitute a direct violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. Briggs whimpered. Section 242 was the federal statute for criminal civil rights violations. It meant federal prison time. "You can't do this!" Briggs suddenly shouted, panic breaking through his paralysis. "I'm a decorated officer. It was a good faith mistake. You're going to ruin my life over a misunderstanding." "You ruined your own life, Officer Briggs," Vivian replied sharply. "When you decided your badge was a license to terrorize, you forfeited the privilege of wearing it." The fallout was swift, brutal, and utterly uncompromising. Within days, the video Gideon Wells recorded leaked to the national press. The optics were devastating. A white, aggressive police officer brutalizing an older, elegantly dressed black woman who happened to be one of the most respected federal judges in the country. The internet exploded. The Crestview Hills Police Department was besieged by reporters, civil rights organizations, and furious citizens. Captain Hale had no choice but to immediately terminate Colton Briggs, stripping him of his badge, his gun, and his pension. But termination was only the beginning of Briggs's nightmare. Days later, heavily armed agents from the FBI field office raided Briggs's home early in the morning. He was marched out of his front door in handcuffs, the exact same way he had marched Vivian out of her car. The Department of Justice immediately launched a massive sweeping probe into the Crestview Hills Police Department. Decades of swept-under-the-rug, excessive force complaints against Briggs and several other officers were suddenly ripped open and investigated by relentless federal prosecutors. Rookie Julian Ellis, who had fully cooperated with the FBI and testified against Briggs, was given a severe reprimand, but kept his job. He learned a permanent, terrifying lesson about the cost of standing by while the law was abused. Months later, Colton Briggs found himself in a federal courtroom standing in an orange jumpsuit. He was not in Vivian Harlan's courtroom, of course. That would be a conflict of interest. He was in the courtroom of her colleague, Judge Quentin Hale, a man equally infamous for his lack of leniency toward corrupt officials. As the guilty verdict for federal civil rights violations was read, Briggs wept openly. He was sentenced to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. Vivian Harlan did not attend the sentencing. She was busy in her own courtroom, sitting high on the bench in her black robes, dispensing justice with the blind, uncompromising fairness she had always championed. When her court adjourned for the day, she walked out to the secure parking garage. Her obsidian black Mercedes S58 sat gleaming under the lights, completely untouched by the tow yard. She slid into the cream leather interior, started the quiet, powerful engine, and drove home. She drove exactly the speed limit, and this time no one dared to pull her over. True justice is not just about punishing the guilty. It is about exposing the systems that allow arrogance and prejudice to thrive in the dark. Judge Vivian Harlan did not just fight back with her title. She used the law to dismantle a bully's entire world, proving that true power lies in composure, knowledge, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. If you love this story of brutal, satisfying karma, hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves seeing justice served, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible real-life storytelling.